Sarah Chen opened her eyes to bright white lights above her. Her head felt heavy and her thoughts moved like thick honey. The room around her looked like a hospital, but everything was wrong. The walls curved in ways that hurt her eyes to follow. Strange symbols glowed softly on surfaces that seemed to be made of living metal. She tried to sit up, but her body felt weak. A gentle hum filled the air, and she realized it was not just sound but something she could feel in her bones. Where was she? The last thing she remembered was walking to her car after work at the research lab. Everything after that was darkness. A door slid open with a soft whisper. What walked through made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. The being stood over 7 feet tall with blue-gray skin that shimmered like scales. Forearms moved with fluid grace, and large black eyes studied her with obvious intelligence. When it spoke, the words came from a device on its chest, not from the small mouth beneath its eyes. "The specimen is awake," it said in perfect English, though the voice sounded flat and mechanical. "I am Chief Xenobiologist Kethvar of the research vessel Synthesis." "You are safe," Sarah's mind raced. This had to be a dream or hallucination. Aliens were not real. They could not be real. But the cold air on her skin and the strange smell in the room felt too real to be imagination. "Where am I?" she managed to whisper. "You were found floating in an escape pod in Sector 7 Alpha," Kethvar replied. "Your craft was badly damaged. We brought you aboard for medical treatment." The alien moved to a wall panel that lit up at its touch. Streams of data flowed across the surface in those same strange symbols. Sarah watched as Kethavar's 4 hands moved across the display with practiced ease. "Our medical AI Nexus has been running standard biological scans," Kethavar continued. "However, we are encountering unusual results." A new voice filled the room, smooth and calm like a radio announcer. "Biological scan complete. DNA analysis shows patterns not found in any known database. Classification unknown. Species origin cannot determine." Sarah sat up slowly, her head spinning. "I'm human." From Earth, there was a long pause. The symbols on the wall display flickered and changed rapidly. Then Nexus spoke again, but this time its voice carried a strange electronic stutter. "Error. Error. No database entry found for species designation human. No astronomical records for planet designation Earth. Please define." "Earth?" Kethvar's large eyes widened and all 4 of its arms went still. It stared at Sarah with an expression she could not read. "That is impossible," the alien whispered. "Our database contains information on over 10 million species and 50 billion catalogued worlds." Sarah felt cold fear creep up her spine. "Earth is the 3rd planet from our sun. It's where I come from. It's where humans live. Nexus, run a deep archive search for any reference to Earth or humans," Kethavar ordered. The room filled with the sound of electronic chirping and buzzing. Lights flashed across every surface as the ship's computer searched its vast memory. Sarah watched in growing horror as minutes passed with no result. "Deep archive search complete," Nexus finally announced. "No records found. No stellar cartography data found. No species classification found." Kethavar moved closer to Sarah's bed, its forearms making quick gestures that she somehow understood meant confusion or distress. "This has never happened before," it said. "Every species we encounter has some record in our database. Even if we have never met them directly, there are usually references, stories, or at least astronomical data about their home world." Sarah's mind reeled. How could an entire planet be missing from their records? Earth had billions of people, thousands of years of history, art, music, literature. How could it simply not exist in their database? "Maybe your computer is broken," she suggested weakly. "Nexus controls the navigation, life support, and all ship functions," Kethvar replied. "If it were malfunctioning, we would know." Another alien entered the room, smaller than Kethvar but moving with quick, nervous energy. This one had gray skin covered in fine fur and large ears that twitched constantly. It spoke in rapid clicks and whistles that the translation device turned into words. "Chief, the biological readings are getting stranger. Her cellular structure is unlike anything in our genetic database. The healing rate is impossible. And look at this." The new alien held up a device that projected a hologram of Sarah's DNA. Even to her untrained eye, it looked incredibly complex. Strands twisted and folded in patterns that seemed to shimmer and change as she watched. "Her genetic code contains sequences that should not exist," the alien continued. "It suggests evolution under gravitational, atmospheric, and radiation conditions that would be lethal to most known life forms." Kethvar studied the hologram carefully, as if her species developed on a world with extreme environmental pressures. Or multiple different environments, the smaller alien added. The genetic markers suggest adaptation to desert, Arctic, tropical, high altitude, and deep ocean conditions. All in the same species. That is impossible. Sarah felt a strange mixture of pride and confusion. She had never thought of humans as particularly special. People lived in all kinds of places on Earth, from hot deserts to frozen mountains to underwater research stations. It seemed normal to her. Humans live everywhere on Earth, she said. We adapt. Both aliens went very still. They looked at each other with what Sarah was beginning to recognize as their version of alarm. No species lives everywhere, Kethvar said slowly. Biological specialization is a universal constant. Species evolve for specific environments. They do not adapt to everything. But humans do, Sarah insisted. We live in every climate, every altitude, every environment Earth has. We build cities in deserts and in Arctic ice. We work underwater and in space. The room fell silent except for the constant humming of the ship's systems. Sarah could see the aliens struggling to understand what she was telling them. Nexus, Kethvar said finally. What is the theoretical biological impact of a species that can adapt to any environment? Such a species would possess unlimited evolutionary potential, Nexus replied. It would be capable of surviving and thriving in any habitat, potentially outcompeting all other life forms. Theoretical designation, Apex adaptive species. Threat level, extreme. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Threat level? Kethvar backed away from her bed, its four arms making quick defensive gestures. An apex adaptive species would be the most dangerous form of life possible, it explained. It could colonize any world, survive any disaster, and potentially dominate any ecosystem it encountered. But I'm not dangerous, Sarah protested. I'm just a research scientist. I study plant genetics. Plant genetics, the smaller alien repeated. Biological manipulation and modification. It's not like that, Sarah said desperately. I just try to help crops grow better in different climates. The two aliens exchanged another look that Sarah was learning to fear. She manipulates genetic material to make organisms more adaptable, Kethvar said slowly, just as her species has become more adaptable. Sarah realized with growing horror that everything she said seemed to make things worse. She was not a monster or a threat. She was just a person who had somehow ended up very far from home. But to these aliens, she represented something they had never encountered before. Something that terrified them. The door slid open again and more aliens entered. These wore different clothing and carried devices that looked suspiciously like weapons. Security team to medical bay, Nexus announced. Potential biological hazard detected. Sarah looked around at the ring of alien faces staring at her with fear and suspicion. She was alone, billions of miles from home, and no one even believed her world existed. Please, she whispered. I just want to go home. Sarah spent 3 days in what the aliens politely called protective custody, but felt more like a prison cell. The room had no windows, only walls that glowed with soft light. Food appeared through a slot 3 times a day. It tasted like cardboard but kept her alive. She was not completely alone. Kethvar visited every few hours to ask questions about Earth and humans. The alien seemed genuinely curious rather than hostile, which gave Sarah some hope. During these visits, she learned that the ship carried over 200 beings from dozens of different species, all working together on some kind of galactic research project. We study primitive worlds, Kethvar explained during one visit, planets with early life forms or developing civilizations. We document their progress and report to the Galactic Council. What happens to the planets you study? Sarah asked. Depends on their development level. Some are left alone to evolve naturally. Others are contacted when they reach appropriate technological advancement. A few are placed under protection if they face extinction events. Sarah felt a flicker of hope. Maybe Earth is under protection. Maybe that's why it's not in your database. Kethvar's large black eyes reflected what she was learning to recognize as doubt. Protection protocols require extensive documentation. There would be records. That afternoon, Sarah discovered something unexpected about her new situation. When she pressed her hand against the wall panel that controlled her room's lighting, it responded to her touch. The aliens had not given her access, but somehow the system recognized her anyway. She spent hours learning to use the interface. The symbols were completely foreign, but after a while patterns began to emerge. Some symbols appeared frequently together. Others seemed to indicate actions or commands. It was like solving a puzzle, and Sarah had always been good at puzzles. By the end of the second day, she could control basic room functions. By the third day, she had figured out how to access the ship's general information network. Not the secure areas, but public databases that any crew member could use. What she found there made her blood run cold. Buried deep in historical archives, scattered across dozens of different files, were fragments of information about Earth. Most were corrupted or incomplete, but when Sarah pieced them together, a picture began to emerge. Earth was not unknown. It was forgotten on purpose. The oldest files were over 3,000 years old. They mentioned a Category 5 quarantine zone around a star system that matched Earth's location. The files described rapid technological advancement and uncontrolled adaptive evolution as reasons for the quarantine. Newer files were even more disturbing. They mentioned containment protocols and monitoring stations. There were references to the human problem and something called Directive 847, Total Information Suppression. Sarah's hands shook as she read file after file. Her species had not been forgotten. They had been deliberately erased from galactic records. The door to her room slid open. Kethavar entered, followed by the smaller gray alien she now knew was called Vexti. Both looked agitated. "We have been reviewing your biological data more carefully," Kethavar said without preamble. "The results are disturbing." Sarah minimized the archive files quickly, hoping they had not seen what she was reading. "Your healing rate is accelerating," Vexti added, its large ears twitching nervously. "Cuts that should take days to heal are closing in hours. Your muscle density is increasing. Your brain activity shows patterns we have never recorded." "Is that bad?" Sarah asked, though she could guess the answer. "Your body is adapting to the ship's environment," Kethavar explained. "The artificial gravity, the atmospheric mixture, the radiation levels. Most species require weeks or months to adjust to new conditions, if they can adjust at all. You are doing it in days." Sarah looked down at her hands. Now that they mentioned it, she did feel stronger than when she first woke up. The air that had seemed thin and strange now felt normal. The ship's gravity, which had made her feel heavy at first, now felt comfortable. "This is what we feared," Vexti continued. "An apex adaptive species would not just survive in new environments. It would optimize for them." "What does that mean?" Sarah asked. "It means you are becoming more than you were," Kethavar replied. "Your species' genetic programming is rewriting itself to make you more suited for life aboard our ship. That level of biological flexibility is unprecedented." Sarah felt a strange mix of fear and pride. Humans were adaptable. She had always known that. But seeing alien scientists struggle to understand it made her realize just how unusual that might be. "I need to show you something," she said, quietly. Sarah turned back to the wall panel and called up the archive files she had been reading. Kethavar and Vexti moved closer, their translation devices working overtime to convert the ancient text. "Where did you find these?" Kethavar demanded. "Your own archives," Sarah replied. "They're buried deep, but they're there. Earth isn't missing from your database. It's been classified." The two aliens read in silence for several minutes. Sarah watched their body language change from confusion to alarm, to something that looked like terror. "Directive 847, Vexti whispered. "Total information suppression. I have heard of this, but only in rumors." "What is it?" Sarah asked. Kethavar's forearms moved in rapid, agitated gestures. "The highest level of classification in galactic law, used only for threats to the stability of interstellar civilization itself." "But humans aren't a threat," Sarah protested. "We've never even left our solar system. Not successfully, anyway." "According to these files, that may not matter," Vexti said, still reading. "Rapid technological advancement. Exponential adaptation rates. Multiple independent evolutionary paths within a single species." Kethavar pulled up additional files from the archive. "Look at this. Human technological development rate exceeds galactic standard by factor of 50. Estimated time to interstellar capability, 2 to 5 decades. Recommended action, immediate containment." Sarah stared at the screen. "That was written 3,000 years ago." "Yes," Kethavar said grimly. 3,000 years ago, your species was considered an existential threat to galactic civilization. The Galactic Council decided to quarantine your entire star system and erase all records of your existence. But why? Sarah asked. What were humans doing that was so dangerous? Vexti found another file and displayed it. This one contained images along with text. Sarah saw pictures of early human cities, primitive spacecraft, and what looked like scientific equipment. According to this report, humans were developing technology at an impossible rate, Vexti explained. Most species take thousands of years to progress from basic agriculture to spaceflight. Humans did it in less than 10,000 years. That doesn't seem unusual, Sarah said. It is extremely unusual, Kethvar replied. The average species requires 50 to 100,000 years for that level of development. Some never achieve spaceflight at all. Sarah felt a strange chill. She had never thought of human development as particularly fast. It seemed natural that people would invent new things and improve on old ideas. There's more, Vexti continued. The report mentions that humans were beginning to reverse engineer alien technology from crashed vessels. Not just copy it, but understand and improve upon it. That's impossible, Kethvar said flatly. Alien technology is based on completely different scientific principles. No species can understand and replicate technology from other worlds without decades of study. Sarah thought about her own work with plant genetics. She had often taken techniques from one field and applied them to another. Cross-pollinating ideas seemed natural to her. Humans do that a lot, she said. We take ideas from one place and use them somewhere else. We call it innovation. Both aliens stared at her with what she was learning to recognize as their version of shock. Innovation, at that level, would make humans capable of matching any technology they encountered, Vexti said slowly. They could potentially reverse engineer and improve upon the most advanced systems in the galaxy. Within decades instead of millennia, Kethvar added. Sarah began to understand why the aliens seemed so frightened. From their perspective, humans were not just another species. They were something that could potentially outpace and outcompete every other civilization in the galaxy. The files mention monitoring stations, she said. Are you still watching Earth? Kethvar and Vexti exchanged one of their looks that Sarah had learned meant they were sharing information she could not understand. We should report this to the ship's commander, Vexti said finally. No, Kethvar replied sharply. Not yet. If the quarantine protocols are still active, reporting a human presence could trigger automatic containment procedures. What kind of containment procedures? Sarah asked, though she was afraid of the answer. Neither alien replied, but their body language told her everything she needed to know. She was not just lost in space. She was evidence that the most classified threat in galactic history had somehow broken free of its prison. Sarah's world changed forever when the ship's emergency alarm started screaming. She was in her quarters, reading more archived files about Earth, when red lights began flashing and a voice echoed through the ship in a dozen different languages. The translation came last. Critical system failure. All crew to emergency stations. Repeat. Critical system failure. Through her room's communication panel, Sarah could hear shouting and the sound of running feet in the corridors. The ship shuddered around her, a deep vibration that made her teeth ache. Kethvar burst through her door without the usual polite announcement. The alien's forearms moved frantically as it spoke. We need your help, it said without preamble. My help? Sarah stood up quickly. I don't know anything about your technology. The ship has suffered catastrophic damage to its primary power coupling. We are trapped in the gravity well of a dying star. Without repairs, we will be pulled in and destroyed within 6 hours. Sarah felt her heart racing. What can I do? I'm not an engineer. You said humans adapt and innovate. We need innovation now. Kethvar gestured for her to follow. Our best engineers have declared the situation impossible. The damage requires repairs in conditions that would kill any known species. They ran through corridors filled with panicked aliens. Sarah saw dozens of different species she had never encountered before, all working frantically at control panels and communication devices. The ship continued to shake, and she could feel it being pulled by forces beyond her understanding. They arrived at what looked like the ship's main engineering section. The air here was thick and hot, filled with acrid smoke that made Sarah's eyes water. Massive machinery lined the walls, much of it sparking or simply dead. In the center of the room was a hole in the floor. Through it, Sarah could see into a chamber filled with swirling energy that hurt to look at directly. The energy was beautiful and terrifying, like looking into the heart of a star. "The power coupling is down there," Kethvar explained, pointing into the chamber. "It requires manual realignment, but the radiation levels would kill any of us instantly." A new alien approached them, this one wearing what looked like a protective suit. It was tall and thin with silver skin and no visible eyes. When it spoke, the voice came from somewhere inside its head. "The environment in the coupling chamber is lethal," it said in a voice like wind through metal. "Radiation levels exceed safe exposure limits by factor of 800. Temperature is above the melting point of most biological materials. Atmospheric pressure would crush most species." Sarah looked down into the swirling energy. "And you want me to go down there?" "Your biological data suggests you might survive conditions that would kill us," Kethvar said. "Your species' adaptation rate is unprecedented." "But I've never been exposed to that kind of radiation," Sarah protested. "I could die. We will all die if nothing is done," the silver alien replied. "Humans, according to your files, evolved under radiation levels that would be lethal to most species. Your planet orbits a star that produces dangerous radiation. You have already survived what should be impossible." Sarah stared into the chamber. The energy down there moved like a living thing, beautiful and deadly. She thought about Earth's sun, how humans had always lived under its radiation. They used sunscreen and wore protective clothing, but they had never thought of sunlight as particularly dangerous. "What would I need to do?" she asked. Kethvar pulled up a holographic display showing the coupling mechanism. It looked like a massive mechanical flower with dozens of petals that had been twisted out of alignment. "The coupling arms need to be manually reset," it explained. "Each arm must be rotated exactly 37 degrees clockwise and locked into position. The work requires precision but not specialized knowledge." "How long would it take?" "For one of us, if we could survive the conditions, approximately 20 minutes, the silver alien replied. "For someone unfamiliar with the mechanism, perhaps an hour." Sarah felt sweat beating on her forehead despite the hot air. An hour in that radiation chamber. An hour exposed to energy that could kill her instantly. But looking around at the panicked faces of the crew, she realized they were all going to die anyway if she did nothing. "I'll need instructions," she said finally, "and I want to know exactly how to get out of there if something goes wrong." The next few minutes were a blur of technical explanations and safety procedures. Sarah learned that the chamber could be accessed through an airlock system. She would wear a protective suit that might buy her a few extra minutes of survival. Most importantly, there was an emergency extraction system that could pull her out if she lost consciousness. "One more thing," Kethvar said as she prepared to enter the airlock. "If you begin to feel strange, if your vision changes or you become disoriented, get out immediately. Radiation poisoning can cause hallucinations and confusion." Sarah nodded and stepped into the airlock. The suit they had given her was clearly not designed for human anatomy, but she had managed to make it work. It felt bulky and awkward, but it would have to do. The inner door opened and she stepped into hell. The radiation chamber was worse than she had imagined. The air itself seemed to burn, and the energy swirling around her made everything look distorted and strange. The coupling mechanism loomed above her like a mechanical monster, its twisted arms reaching in all directions. Sarah's skin immediately began to feel hot, like a sunburn developing in fast motion. The radiation counter on her suit started clicking rapidly, then began to emit a steady whine that meant she was being exposed to dangerous levels. She ignored it and focused on the task. The first coupling arm was within reach. Following the instructions she had memorized, she grabbed it and began to turn. The metal was hot even through her protective gloves, but it moved when she applied pressure. 37 degrees clockwise. Lock into position. Move to the next arm. By the time she reached the third arm, Sarah's vision was beginning to blur. The radiation counter on her suit had given up making noise and was simply displaying a solid red warning light. She could feel her heart racing and her hands beginning to shake. But something strange was happening. Instead of getting weaker, she was starting to feel stronger. The heat that had been painful was becoming comfortable. The radiation that should have been killing her was making her feel more alive. She worked faster, moving from arm to arm with increasing confidence. Her body was adapting to the chamber's conditions, just as it had adapted to the ship's environment. What should have been lethal was becoming normal. By the time she reached the 10th arm, Sarah realized she was no longer following the careful procedures the aliens had taught her. She was improvising, finding faster ways to align the mechanisms. She could see patterns in the energy flow that the original designers had missed, inefficiencies that could be corrected with minor adjustments. When she finished the required realignments, she did not stop. She began making improvements. The coupling system had been designed with redundant safety features that actually reduced its efficiency. Sarah bypassed them. The energy flow patterns were uneven, causing dangerous fluctuations. She smoothed them out. The entire mechanism could be optimized to produce 20% more power with the same input. She worked for 3 hours, completely lost in the technical challenge. When she finally emerged from the chamber, the ship's crew was staring at her in shock. "The power coupling is not just repaired," Nexus announced to the bridge. "It has been improved. Power output is increased by 22%. Efficiency ratings are beyond theoretical maximums." Sarah pulled off her helmet and looked around at the alien faces watching her. She felt great. Better than great. The radiation exposure had left her feeling energized and alert. "How do you feel?" Cathvar asked carefully. "Fine," Sarah replied. "Actually, I feel better than fine. I feel like I could do that again." Bexty held up a medical scanner and pointed it at her. Its large ears began twitching rapidly as it read the results. "Impossible," it whispered. "She should be dead." The radiation exposure was 8 times the lethal dose for any known species. "But I'm not dead," Sarah pointed out. "And I fixed your engine." "You did more than fix it," the silver alien said, its voice carrying a note of awe. "You improved it. The modifications you made should not be possible with manual tools." Sarah looked back at the chamber where she had worked. "I just saw some ways to make it work better." It wasn't that complicated. The aliens exchanged those looks again, the ones that meant they were having thoughts that terrified them. "The energy patterns in that chamber are beyond the comprehension of most species," Cathvar said slowly. "It requires advanced degrees in quantum engineering to understand the principles involved." "I don't have any degrees in quantum engineering," Sarah said. "I just looked at it and saw how it worked." "That is impossible," Vexty repeated. "But I did it," Sarah replied. She was beginning to understand that her definition of impossible was very different from theirs. To humans, impossible just meant difficult or challenging. To these aliens, impossible meant something that could not be done under any circumstances. "We need to report this to the Galactic Council," the silver alien said. "No," Cathavar replied sharply. "Absolutely not. If they learn that a human is loose in the galaxy, and that she can improve our technology through intuition alone, they will initiate extinction protocols." Extinction Proto-Sarah could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the swirling energy of the radiation chamber and felt the strange exhilaration of solving impossible problems. 3 days had passed since she repaired the ship, and the crew still watched her with a mixture of awe and fear. She had asked Nexus for access to the ship's educational databases, claiming she wanted to learn more about galactic civilization. What she really wanted was to understand why her species terrified everyone so much. The AI had granted her request, perhaps because she had saved the ship, or perhaps because it was curious about her capabilities. Either way, Sarah now had access to thousands of years of galactic history, and what she found there painted a picture that made her stomach turn. The Galactic Council was not the benevolent organization she had imagined. It was a rigid system designed to maintain the status quo at all costs. Species that developed too quickly were guided into approved paths. Civilizations that showed signs of unusual innovation were subjected to cultural adjustment programs, and those that posed a direct threat to galactic stability were eliminated. Sarah found records of entire species that had simply vanished from the historical record. Their worlds were listed as failed colonies or natural disasters, but the classified files told a different story. They had been destroyed for being too dangerous, too unpredictable, or too adaptive. Humans, it seemed, were all three. She was deep in a particularly disturbing file about containment operations when her door chimed. Sarah quickly minimized the display and called for whoever it was to enter. To her surprise, it was not Cathvar or Vexty. Instead, a being she had never seen before glided into her room. It was roughly humanoid, but seemed to be made of living crystal. Light flowed through its body in patterns that were beautiful and hypnotic. "I am Zenthara, communications officer of the synthesis," it said in a voice like singing crystal. "I must speak with you about a matter of extreme urgency." Sarah gestured to the only chair in the room, but Zenthara remained standing. The light patterns in its body shifted to what looked like agitation. I have been monitoring galactic communication channels, it continued. 3 hours ago, an automated monitoring station in the outer rim detected an energy signature that matches your escape pod. Sarah felt her heart skip. What does that mean? It means the Galactic Council knows you exist, Xanthara replied. More specifically, it means they know a human has left the quarantine zone around Earth. The crystal being moved to Sarah's wall display and activated it with a gesture. The screen filled with official-looking documents covered in symbols that the translation system rendered into basic English. This is a priority alpha security alert, Xanthara explained. It has been sent to every ship, station, and outpost in the galaxy. They are looking for you. Sarah read the translated text with growing horror. The alert described her as an escaped quarantine subject and a potential extinction-level threat. It offered enormous rewards for her capture and authorized the use of lethal force if necessary. But they don't even know who I am, Sarah protested. I'm just one person. One person from a species that the Council has spent 3,000 years trying to contain, Xanthara replied. To them, you represent the failure of their most important security protocol. The crystal being brought up another display, this one showing a star map of the local galactic region. Red dots were appearing across the map as Sarah watched. Council ships are converging on this sector, Xanthara continued. They will be here within 2 days. Sarah stared at the approaching fleet. Dozens of ships all coming for her. What happens when they get here? Best case scenario, they capture you and return you to the quarantine zone, Xanthara said. Worst case scenario, they decide you are too dangerous to keep alive and eliminate you along with any evidence of your escape. Evidence like this ship and everyone on it, Sarah realized. Precisely. Sarah felt sick. She had thought her biggest problem was being lost in space. Now she realized that her presence was endangering the lives of everyone who had helped her. There might be another option, Xanthara said carefully, but it would require you to access restricted archives that are beyond my clearance level. What kind of archives? The deepest classified files about Earth and humanity. The real records that explain why your species was quarantined in the first place. Sarah looked at the wall display, still showing her growing proficiency with alien systems. Over the past week, she had learned to navigate interfaces that had taken other species years to master. Nexus itself had commented on her unusual ability to understand and manipulate technology she had never seen before. You think I can break into their secure databases? I think you can do things that should be impossible, Xanthara replied. The question is whether you are willing to try. Sarah thought about the approaching fleet, about the frightened faces of the crew, about the secret history of her species that someone had worked very hard to hide. She nodded. Tell me what I need to do. The next several hours were the most intense of Sarah's life. With Xanthara guiding her, she dove deep into the ship's computer systems, using pathways and backdoors that the crystal being had discovered during its communications monitoring. Sarah's ability to understand alien technology proved even more remarkable than anyone had realized. She did not just learn to use the systems, she began to see the underlying patterns that governed them. Within minutes, she was navigating computer networks like she had designed them herself. The first breakthrough came when she realized that the ship's computers were connected to a vast galactic network. Every time Nexus communicated with other ships or updated its databases, it left traces of connection protocols that could be followed backward. This is incredible, Xanthara said, as Sarah effortlessly traced data pathways across light years of space. You are accessing networks that require specialized training to even understand. Sarah barely heard the compliment. She was lost in the flow of information, following threads of data from one system to another. It was like solving a massive puzzle, each piece leading to the next. She found the first restricted archive hidden behind 7 layers of encryption that would have taken galactic computer specialists weeks to crack. Sarah broke through them in minutes, not by understanding the mathematical principles involved, but by seeing the patterns that connected the encryption keys. The files she found there made her previous discoveries seem trivial. Earth was not just quarantined. It was being actively monitored by a network of automated stations that had been watching human development for 3,000 years. The stations reported back to the Council regularly, documenting every advance in human technology and culture. But the reports had not been what the Council expected. Instead of remaining static or advancing slowly, humanity had continued to develop at an accelerating pace. Worse, they had begun to show signs of developing technologies that the Council itself did not possess. "Look at this," Sarah said, pulling up a report dated just 50 years ago. "They're talking about human development of quantum computing, genetic engineering, and artificial intelligence. All technologies that were supposed to be impossible for a quarantined species." "Those are advanced galactic technologies," Zenthara replied. Its light patterns shifting to what Sarah was learning meant shock. "Humans developed them independently?" Sarah found more recent reports that were even more disturbing. Human space exploration was advancing rapidly. Scientists were developing faster-than-light communication theories. There were even references to experimental projects that seemed to be approaching true interstellar travel capability. "The Council is afraid," Sarah realized. "They've been watching us for 3,000 years, waiting for us to stagnate or die out. Instead, we're getting closer to breaking out of the quarantine on our own." "That would explain the extreme response to your escape," Zenthara said. "If humans can leave Earth independently, the quarantine has already failed." Sarah dug deeper into the archives, following data trails that led to the highest levels of galactic government. What she found in the Council's classified strategic documents changed everything she thought she knew about her situation. "Zenthara," she said quietly, "I don't think I escaped from Earth." "What do you mean?" Sarah pulled up a file that made her hands shake as she read it. "According to this, the Council has been conducting extraction operations for the past 200 years. They've been taking humans from Earth for study." The crystal being went very still. "Taking humans? Why?" "To understand how we work, to figure out what makes us so adaptable, and to develop countermeasures in case we ever broke free of the quarantine." Sarah found her own file buried deep in the Council's records. Her stomach dropped as she read it. "I wasn't in an accident," she whispered. "I was abducted. The Council took me from Earth to study, and something went wrong with their transport. That's how I ended up in the escape pod." She was not a lost traveler who had stumbled into galactic civilization. She was a test subject who had escaped from her captors. "There's more," Sarah continued, her voice getting stronger as anger replaced fear. "Hundreds of humans have been taken over the years. Most of them died in Council laboratories. The ones who survived were Subja." Sarah stood in the ship's main communication center, surrounded by technology that could reach every corner of the galaxy. In 6 hours, the Council fleet would arrive. In 7 hours, if her plan failed, she would be back in a laboratory cage. But if her plan succeeded, everything would change. "Are you certain about this?" Kethavar asked for the 10th time. The alien's forearms moved in nervous patterns as it watched Sarah make final adjustments to the communication array. "Certain that it will work?" "Yes," Sarah replied without looking up from her modifications. "Certain that it's the right thing to do?" "Also yes." She had spent the last 18 hours completely rewiring the ship's communication system. What had once been capable of reaching nearby star systems could now broadcast to every inhabited world in the galaxy simultaneously. The modifications should have been impossible with the available equipment, but Sarah had learned to stop thinking in terms of impossible. Zenthara's crystalline form pulsed with anxious light patterns. "The Council will consider this an act of war. They will not just capture you after this. They will hunt down everyone who helped you." "They were already going to do that," Sarah pointed out. "At least this way the galaxy will know why." Vexti scurried into the communication center, its large ears twitching frantically. "Council ships have entered scanner range. 6 heavy cruisers and a command vessel. They're demanding our immediate surrender." Sarah looked around at the assembled crew. Representatives from dozens of species had gathered to witness what she was about to do. Some looked terrified, others curious, and a few seemed almost excited. "This is your last chance to stop me," she told them. "Once I send this message, there's no going back." "The message will reach over 50 billion inhabited worlds," Nexus announced from the ship's speakers. "Estimated audience 700 trillion beings. Then, they'll finally hear the truth," Sarah said. She activated the communication array and felt the familiar surge of understanding that came whenever she worked with alien technology. The system responded to her touch as if it had been designed specifically for her use. "This is Sarah Chen of Earth, transmitting to all inhabited worlds of the galactic community," she began, her voice carrying across impossible distances to worlds she had never imagined. 3,000 years ago, your governments made a decision about my species. They decided that humans were too dangerous to be allowed into galactic civilization. They quarantined our world, erased us from your databases, and pretended we did not exist. On screens throughout the galaxy, being stopped what they were doing to listen to the impossible broadcast from a species that was not supposed to exist. I am here to tell you that the quarantine has failed, not because humans have developed interstellar travel, though we are close. Not because we have broken free of your monitoring stations, though we could. The quarantine has failed because your own government has been violating it for 200 years. Sarah pulled up the classified files she had discovered and transmitted them along with her voice. Evidence of abductions, illegal experiments, and council research programs flowed across communication networks that had never carried such information before. Hundreds of my people have been taken from Earth for study. Most died in your laboratories. The survivors are still being held in research facilities across the galaxy, subjected to experiments designed to understand and replicate human adaptability. The response was immediate. Communication networks across the galaxy began lighting up with responses, questions, and demands for more information. On some worlds, the broadcasts were cut off by government censors. On others, the populations demanded answers from their leaders. Your council fears humans because we adapt quickly and solve problems in ways they do not understand. They are correct to fear us, but not for the reasons they think. Sarah made more adjustments to the communication array, boosting the signal strength beyond what should have been possible with the available power. We are not dangerous because we are aggressive or warlike. We are dangerous because we refuse to accept limitations. When we encounter a problem that seems impossible to solve, we solve it anyway. When we face an environment that should kill us, we adapt to it. When we find technology we do not understand, we learn to understand it and then we improve it. Through the ship's sensors, Sarah could see the Council fleet positioning itself for attack. They had stopped demanding surrender and were preparing to destroy the ship to silence her broadcast. I have been on this alien vessel for 2 weeks. In that time, I have learned to use technology that took other species years to master. I have survived radiation levels that should have killed me instantly. I have repaired and improved systems that your best engineers declared impossible to fix. Sarah's fingers moved across the communication controls, implementing modifications that turned the broadcast system into something far more powerful than its designers had ever intended. I did not do these things because I am special or unique among humans. I did them because this is what humans do. We adapt, we learn, we improve everything we touch. The first energy bolts from the Council ship struck the vessel's shields. The ship shuddered, but Sarah's modifications to the power coupling held firm, providing energy levels that kept the defensive systems running at peak efficiency. Your governments want to keep humans quarantined because they know that if we join galactic civilization, we will change it. We will solve problems you thought were unsolvable. We will improve technologies you thought were perfect. We will ask questions you do not want answered. More weapons fire struck the ship. Warning alarms began blaring throughout the vessel. But Sarah continued her broadcast without interruption. They are correct. We will change everything. But change is not always destruction. Sometimes change is improvement. Through the communication array, Sarah could hear responses coming in from across the galaxy. Scientists asking for more information about human capabilities. Governments demanding explanations from the Council. Populations questioning why they had never been told about Earth. The Council has told you that humans are a threat to galactic stability. I say that we are a threat to galactic stagnation. For 3,000 years, your civilization has remained essentially unchanged. The same technologies, the same solutions, the same limitations. You have achieved stability by accepting that some problems cannot be solved. The ship's shields were beginning to fail under the concentrated fire from the Council fleet. But Sarah had one more modification to make, one that would ensure her message reached its intended destination. Humans do not accept unsolvable problems. We have spent 3,000 years in isolation, and in that time we have continued to grow and develop and improve. We are not the same species you quarantined. We are better than you remember, and we are ready to share what we have learned. Sarah activated the final component of her plan. Hidden in the data stream of her broadcast was a complete technical specifications package for every improvement she had made to the ship's systems. The radiation coupling modifications, the communication array enhancements, the shield efficiency improvements. all of it transmitted to anyone with the technical knowledge to understand it. These are the gifts we bring to galactic civilization. Solutions to problems you thought were impossible. Improvements to technologies you thought were perfect. Hope for challenges you thought were insurmountable. The ship's shields failed completely. The next energy bolt would likely destroy them all. But Sarah's message was almost complete. The Council will try to silence this broadcast. They will claim that humans are too dangerous to be trusted. They will say that we must remain quarantined for the safety of all. Do not let them make that decision for you. Through her connection to the Galactic Communication Network, Sarah could sense the enormous response her broadcast was generating. The message was being recorded, copied, and retransmitted faster than the Council could suppress it. Every species in this galaxy has something unique to contribute. Humans contribute our refusal to accept the impossible. Judge for yourselves whether that makes us too dangerous to know. The communication array began to overload from the power level Sarah was pushing through it. Sparks flew from control panels as systems exceeded their design specifications. But the message was reaching its target. This is Sarah Chen of Earth, and this will not be the last time you hear from us. We are coming whether you invite us or not. The question is whether we come as friends or as refugees fleeing your persecution. The Council ships fired their final volley, energy bolts that would have vaporized the vessel in normal circumstances. But Sarah's improvements to the power coupling had done more than increase efficiency. They had fundamentally changed how the ship's systems worked together. Instead of being destroyed, the ship absorbed the energy and converted it into power for its own systems. What should have been a killing blow became fuel for escape. See you soon, Sarah concluded, and cut the transmission. The response from across the galaxy was immediate and overwhelming. The broadcast had reached an estimated audience of over 700 trillion beings on 50,000 worlds. It was being retransmitted, analyzed, and debated on every major communication network.